Hello, welcome everybody. Josh, the RV nerd of Bish's RV, as the sign behind me, my hat, my coat, my shirt, my everything continues to indicate. I don't know why I feel the need to always say it, but neither here nor there. Back again with a new year and our first industry update for the season. We're going to take a quick look back at a little bit of some of the stats from last year, as well as some predictions moving forward into this season, some things that are happening, how some tariffs may be affecting the cost of some RV parts. Also, a little situation where the Department of Justice has cracked down on some of the junk fee practices that are out there in the industry. It's not a lot, but it's a start. Little update on the truck motor home ban, as it's been called, that it's affecting nearly a dozen states potentially, and how that's kind of updating and shaping up, as well as a bunch of other things. And actually, at the end of the video, I've got a little bit of a insight for you on a way that you could actually basically get entered to win a free RV. So that ain't all bad. We're going to kick the year off potentially with some news on a free RV. Let's get going. As always, we got a lot to cover. And I don't know how well it's showing up on camera, but we have some nasty weather coming in, so I'm going to do my best to try to manage that as we go today. Anyway, it's a small drop in a bucket, but maybe, again, it's a start of at least raising awareness to the practice of junk fees getting added on to a purchase. So those are the things like, oh, so here's the price tag of the RV. And then nobody tells you, by the way, you also have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 of freight, prep, whatever. I don't know. Some of these things get absolutely crazy. I've seen, like, take a look at this over here on the screen. This is a used RV that somebody is buying. The RV was, quote, $8,000 and had $2,000 of fees on a used RV. Well, a lot of that was happening in the state of Oregon during 2017 and 2018. And during that period, basically the state of Oregon's Department of Justice decided that how can I go about this? A major national retailer of RVs needed to pay back about $3.5 million worth of these extra junk fees that were double tagged on to people. Things like items that were factory standard and included on the MSRP, they were recharging people for, stuff like that. State of Oregon said, yeah, you can't do that. Now, obviously, I'm not getting into anyone's names here. I try to be sensitive to the fact that I work for an RV dealership myself, and I'm not trying to specifically headhunt anybody else. My goal, again, is to just let people know what's happening out there. I go back to the idea that I don't care what state you're from, I don't care what dealer you're considering purchasing or what RV it might be. What I recommend you do is shop what I call the total cost of ownership, where let's say you had one check left in your checkbook. What is the actual number you need to literally write on that check to take this thing home? That's the way you can actually understand the total cost of ownership. Because if they're gonna add stuff onto it, they have to tell you what the total figure is with that stuff included. And again, I don't care what you're buying. I don't care where you're buying it from. I think that's just a really smart practice. I would encourage you to continue to try to employ through this coming camping season. The whole what's been called the motorhome ban, but basically just the emissions guidelines that continue to evolve. That's been a very hot button topic, especially around the RV industry lately, and automotive certainly as well, but I don't exist in that sphere of things. There were appeals made. Some of the lower courts had kind of upheld saying, no, this is all pretty cut and dry. It's part of the law that everybody signed in, that California gets to create their own emission standards and other states can opt into them. Appeals were made up to the level of the Supreme Court, who basically declined to hear the case because all they're saying, what they basically said is, listen, we're willing to hear the case if you can present any new reasons as to why we should. But so far, every lower court, you've presented the exact same information that essentially you don't like it. Maybe you feel it's unconstitutional, but it's part of the law, essentially. So the Supreme Court has declined to hear any sort of cases regarding this. Oh God, wet freezing rain. This sucks. I hope you appreciate this, guys. This is terrible. Anyway, it doesn't necessarily mean though that this goose is cooked. Currently, from like what do I want to say? going to court standpoint, litigious, there we go, kind of standpoint. A lot of the potential cases where people would want to sue to say it's unconstitutional are kind of effectively dead, but it doesn't mean that this whole thing is over. So back in like 2019, the administration at the time, they basically rolled back California's ability to do this stuff. And then 3 years later in 2022, different administration reinstituted everything. And by the way, I'm saying administration just because it's true, it's factual, and it doesn't get anyone's blood pressure up because it's not about certain people. It's just about administrations and guidelines, and it's about people. Anyway, the thing is, we have a new administration coming in this month, in January, in fact, who has very openly said they plan to tackle California's ability to govern their own emissions ratings. It's thought by a lot of people that those things may be repealed as a result. Hasn't happened, but we'll see how it goes. The other thing is, there's a 3-year kind of grace period credit debt window that has been introduced into this whole equation. And basically, to give you the ultra cliff notes, the cliff notes of the cliff notes version of this, as I tend to do in these videos, chassis makers basically have like X% of what they build has to be like zero emissions or electrified or whatever, and that gives them credits toward making internal combustion engine things. So companies like Ford, who make electric vehicles, they can sell and make electric vehicles, which allows them to make combustion engines in the the affected states, essentially. Well, the thing is, when they do that, what they actually get are credits, and so if you make one electric vehicle, it might be good for like 8 credits, and there's a whole scale, and there's charts and graphs and everything. But the thing is, if the auto manufacturer or the chassis manufacturer only uses 6 of those credits, they get to keep 2. Now they can pool them, they can stockpile them, they can sell them to other makers, basically. So some internal combustion engine makers have been buying their credits from groups like, we'll say Tesla. They're a well-known electric vehicle manufacturer. We'll go that route. Tesla's made a lot of money selling vehicle credits to other suppliers. Well, other suppliers have finally said, we don't want to do this anymore. We're not going to buy credits from these people. And they've kind of just said that, I guess, we're not going to provide chassis into these regions or whatever. Well, an agreement's been made where there's a 3-year window where the builders who lack credits to make and sell internal combustion engines into the emissions restricted states, they'll be able to continue to do that even if they don't have the credits for like 3 years. But at the end of that 3 years, they got to come up with the credits, they got to buy them, they got to produce zero emissions vehicles, whatever they got to do it to make that happen. So that has allowed some companies, at least on the 3-year short term, to continue to do business as usual. Long term, I highly suspect the groups that are unable to meet the credit requirements now are probably not going to be able to make the credit requirements in the future. That's just a personal theory, just kind of reading the writing on the wall there. But I think that there's a lot of people who are hoping to operate business as usual during the 3-year grace period, if you will, hoping that the incoming administration will roll back emissions ratings so that they won't have to come up with all these credits, so they can just continue to do business as usual. I have zero guarantees of any of that. Nobody tell me that. That's just my own personal estimation and theory. I'd be very curious to hear from you. What are you thinking? Like, do you think that makes sense, or do you see a different whole thing panning out down the line? And now that we have the most of the year's worth of stats from this past calendar year, I got a chance to dive into some numbers, and I kind of asked myself, so who's really on top? Because it seems like every time you pull up any manufacturer site or even any sub-brand site from a manufacturer, they're always the number one. They're the best. They're blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So by the numbers, who is really on top? And I found some interesting things. So here's some stats that I found. Now, I wasn't able to find a way to break it down by the Forest River sub-brand. So Forest River is still lumped all together as a whole, reading as number one. How that actually plays out by individual brand, I don't know. Now, you have some monster groups like Salem and Wildwood in there. You have Rockwood and Flagstaff. You have the Cherokee division comprising just huge volume, plus tons and tons of other things. But overall, your top 5 in volume, you had Forest River, Grand Design, Keystone, Jayco, and Alliance in that order. And it was actually Alliance that kind of caught my eye right there, because they are very clearly the largest independent RV builder out there now, and they have continued to grow even in a down and or challenging market. I don't know how well you're able to see the spots on the side of this thing, but it looks like a Jayco Eagle took a dump on a Keystone Cougar. Anyway, we must have been right in the path of a whole flock of geese flying over this place, because I'm noticing a bunch of landmines around here. Regardless, anyway, I started looking through it. Now, obviously, you notice there was a lot of red on that chart. There were a lot of brands down. But there were a couple groups that had been pulling ahead. Like Northwood was up a little bit. For those who are unaware, they're a really cool manufacturer that is basically based out of Oregon. They're not lightweight. They're not inexpensive. And they're not exactly the most modern, fancy-looking thing, although they've actually made some nice updates recently in the last couple of years. But they're well respected as a long-lasting quality builder. Intech is also on the rise. They're more, where Northwood tends to be very throwback and conservative but rugged built. Intech is like, let's go full future, brother, and let's do all the like fiberglass body and aluminum structure stuff we can. They're also on the up. Now, of course, Brinkley the last couple of years has absolutely been exploding. They've done very well. They've jumped up there in a lot of volume stats very quickly. When you look at the percentage of growth, though, remember that's coming from 2 years ago, essentially zero. So they've grown very, very quickly. They've exploded right out of the gate. But 242% growth from almost nothing, it's a bit of a skewed figure. But I remember one year, Heartland, when they were up and coming, reported like 1,001% growth. Yeah, from nothing, anyway. But again, back to Alliance. Alliance isn't the new kid on the block. They are a well-established manufacturer, and they have found ways to continue to grow and succeed through this time. And later in this video, I think you're going to see one of the differences as to why. I think Alliance is one of the few manufacturers who has truly demonstrated how their people and their customers are their greatest resource. And we've got some evidence as to that later in the video. For now, I've got to clean the rain off my camera. And something finally happened in the October stats that has not happened all year. In case you're kind of curious, market stats, new RV sales and registrations lag a couple months behind real time. So October is the most recent stats number. But for the first time in a year, new RV sales have outpaced their previous year. In October, sales were up about 2.6%. So don't get me wrong, it's not like, wow, guys, the floodgates opened and boy, the party's here. No, just October was a little bit better in 24 than it was in 23. Overall, not mincing words, overall for the year, stats are down, sales are down. There are around 8% fewer RVs purchased this year versus last year. So just to kind of put that out there, basically, the mix-up of what's selling hasn't really changed. Travel trailers absolutely continue to carry the market. Fifth wheels have been treading water. They've been taking care of themselves. That market's not down. Everything else is basically down often painfully. Although, again, in October, Class C sales actually saw a nice little shot in the arm compared to, the year before that. So a couple little glimmers of hope in there. But overall, the total sales of the RV marketplace are down, and as we're about to see, shipments are also down. And we'll talk about what's expected to happen there. I'm telling you, this is awful. So when I make these big videos like this, I've got these little paper notes. They're all soggy and like the pages are frozen together. The microphone that I'm using on the camera, it's got one of those big like fluffy filters on it. It's literally just a big chunk of wet ice right now. I'm just hoping this whole thing doesn't go up in fire in my hands. Anyway, the stats we're about to look at here, this is coming from RVIA, the RV Industry Association. So, different sources have different predictions, but RVIA is predicting that the 2025 calendar year will see about the same number of shipments as 24. They were originally predicting a decent increase. I think that has scaled back a little bit. I think that it's scaled back to only like a 8 to 9% increase. I think they're originally projecting like a 14% increase. They were also projecting a 14% increase in our current year, in the previous year. I'm recording this a couple days before Christmas, and I'm trying to keep in my head that you're watching this in January of the new year, so it's like the space-time continuum isn't making any sense here, Marty. But anyway, shipments were expected to increase in 2024. Didn't happen. Shipments, according to RVIA, they're thinking it will increase, but they've already scaled back on how much they think it's going to increase. They also think it's going to increase a slight bit again for 25. Obviously, time will tell. I'm always really curious to hear, what do you think is going to happen in terms of like how much are the RV manufacturers going to be building this coming year? And a quick discussion on the used market. It kind of frustrates me sometimes when I see certain reports and the way that they are presented to potential readers or viewers or whatever. Most of the stats out there, everyone's like, well, the used towable market is holding pretty flat. So here's a look at the used towable market. For the most part, yeah, it is holding pretty flat. I will say any of these charts, if you look at the history of them, coming into the first quarter of the year, into the second quarter of the year, prices on things tend to go up. It's like, the price of anything in the RV sphere tends to be a little bit higher in the middle months of the year and a little bit lower on the shoulder months of the year, as it were. And I don't expect that to change whatsoever. One thing I would say is if you have a potential trade-in or something like that, your black book values every year, January 1, when the new year rolls over, they always seem, for some reason, to take like at least a 2% punch in the teeth. So if you had been shopping trade figures from an RV dealer in November, and then you go back out December, February at show season, don't be surprised if your trade value didn't go up. That's just not how things go. So the towable market, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. The motorized market's the one that makes me kind of annoyed when I read how people are covering it, because if you look at the bar chart, a lot of sources are just looking at a chart and they're writing a quick blog, probably with stupid AI help that doesn't actually know anything about anything. And they're saying, look, the used motorhome market, the prices are the floor. Buy a used motorhome now. And there's also a lot of other groups saying, well, if motorhomes are going to be banned in 11 or 12 states, then you better buy a used one now so you can get a hold of it, and there's all this stuff out there. It's a bunch of crap. And it really, really annoys me how much of it that I've seen. Motorhome values are basically holding exactly as flat as towables. And I know it doesn't look like that on the chart. What you can't see on the chart is what was being sold. When those values were really spiky high for a couple months, if you consider the fact that the used motorized market is much, much smaller than the used towable market, it only takes one or two really high dollar Class A like diesel pushers to sort of skew those values around. You can imagine that doesn't take too awful much to change things around. Well, a couple of those finally filtered out of the auction blocks after they sit there for a long time. And now what's left over are the rest of the normal motorhomes. So everything is basically flat. There's no clarity. There's no guarantee as to what's happening with the California Air Resources Board and how it may affect things. If it is deemed that certain new motorized RVs are not going to be able to be sold into those states, well then yeah, it would stand to reason that some used motorized values would go up in those regions. But right now it's just way too early to tell all of that, and especially with a 3-year extension grace period put in for certain manufacturers, it's not likely that you'll see a massive chunk or a massive reduction of inventory in those states over the next couple years anyway. So as much as I would love you to go out and just buy an RV, because that's how we make our money. I represent a dealership. That's the majority of where the income comes from. I want it to be for the right reasons. I want it to be because it was the right time for you and you chose to do it, not because we scared you into doing it. And I get really annoyed with all the false bravado garbage tactics out there designed just to scare somebody into doing something. You have plenty of time. don't panic over this thing right now, especially this year. You have no real worry about anything. So if you're on anything of a short-term buyer's basis, just keep calm and camp on and do your normal thing that you would do. And you don't have to really get too excited about anything potentially for another couple of years. And by then, who knows, I also found a recent camping trends report I thought was very, very interesting. One of the things that I always look at is the kind of general age bracket demographic of who's out there camping. And during the COVID pandemic period, the baby boomer bracket of RVers really, really kind of disappeared for a while. And they have been showing back up in greater and greater regularity. Now, during that phase, Gen X was always kind of around, but your millennials really surged as being one of the biggest new groups in RVing, and it really looks like those groups are around and they are here to stay. It's becoming, it's a far more even mix of things out there, which usually the people who are buying affect what manufacturers are building. And I think that in a way it's going to be kind of cool because we're going to see more RVs built for more different groups. When baby boomers were the major buying chunk of the RV industry, everything got really homogenized for the most part toward them. When millennials, Gen X, Y, Z, Elemental P, all the age brackets, the younger age brackets were buying, everything got really tech, flashy, fancy, etc., that way. I think that we're going to see a bit of a mix of things over the next 4 years, which I think is kind of exciting because it gives different people more opportunities to zero in a little bit better on how they want to camp. But the way people are camping, what's been called experiential camping, has really been on the rise. So basically, people like, hey, what if we, rent an RV and we go camping as like a base camp, as we go to that big like outdoor concert music festival kind of thing. People aren't camping just to camp. They're using it as almost a hotel alternative on the way to the fun adventure thing and while they're there. That has really been on the rise. Now, traditional camping's still the biggest chunk of it, but again, people are camping a little bit differently. Also, I think largely based on the fact that campground crowding was such a problem for the longest time, spring and fall camping has absolutely been on the rise to the point that they are starting to challenge summer camping volumes and rates. Summer camping's still the most common time and probably will be since that's when the kids are out of school, so that's when you get the biggest bunkhouse season effectively. But your spring and fall times, people have started to recognize as like some of the most peak couples camping times. And if you really look at a lot of RV manufacturer trends right now, there's not a lot of new development going on in bunkhouse campers. Most of the new development I've noticed has really been in the couples camping segment. Brands that traditionally were bunkhouse specialists have started to flip their mix to being like there's some brands that were like 80% bunks and 20% couples campers are like 60-40. Like they're starting to close and even out that gap. And obviously there's certain specialists, especially as you go higher dollar in the market, they tend to be more couples camping specialists with a couple bunk models here and there. Another thing I thought was really interesting on this is that the literal face of the RV person has been consistently changing. Basically, ethnic diversity continues to grow and even out because essentially Caucasian people were absolutely the single biggest chunk of the whole camping thing. And it turns out camping is for everybody, and everybody is going camping, and everybody continues to camp more. Also, during that whole, like, campgrounds are really crowded phase, which isn't exactly over, don't get me wrong. It's getting better, but it's not over. Solar stuff on RVs. The dialogue changed from, does this RV have solar, to how much solar does this RV have? Well, there's a good chance it may go back to, does this RV have solar? There are some tariffs that have been increasing that have been affecting a number of things, but I've really noticed solar-based components that are, being imported have been hit pretty hard by some of this. And I'm kind of theorizing that down the line what's going to happen here is these things are going to cause RV manufacturers to either go, okay, well, solar is now prepped and it's not standard, it's optional, it's not standard, or if it is going to be included, you're probably going to see the cost of that stuff going up. For the last several years, solar solutions, the cost of them has been steadily going down. And a lot of like big solar enthusiasts that I've seen in the comment section are like, man, solar's getting so cheap, it's just stupid the brands don't do it. Well, it might go back the other direction for a little bit here where it stops being so I wasn't supposed to show that. You're getting a sneak peek at something right there in the background that we haven't made public knowledge yet. So stay tuned for actually, oh crap, if you've been paying attention to the background of this, there are 2 new things I wasn't supposed to show you that might have crept into the background. So yeah, stay tuned for some updates. And by the way, solar stuff either might be more scarce or more expensive. Oops. Moving on. Don't fire me. I also stumbled into this thing. Maybe it's maybe this has always been happening and I was just unaware of it because I don't really follow the hotel group chain thing, but Marriott kind of getting sort of lightly into the outdoor industry. Marriott's not buying an RV company, they're not building RVs. I don't want to like what? Basically, they're effectively buying some companies and some properties and some things like that where they're going to have like 29 properties with over like 1,200 cabins where it looks very much, I've seen some of these things, they look just like a campsite, but it's just a cabin, you know. Now, properties like that have always existed, but I haven't seen like major hotel retailer chains doing stuff like that before. Maybe, again, I was just unaware of it. I'm also not a person who's done the real cabin camping kind of thing, if you will. Like, you know, my little household, we tend to do some RVing, but we also, like, we're big theme park hounds, roller coaster hounds. And, like, if we're going to go to Universal Studios in Florida or something like that, we're going to get a hotel to absolutely, we're going to fly down, we're going to get a hotel to maximize all of our time there rather than, you know, spend a bunch of our trip towing, because there is a bunch of time associated with that. So, you know, there's always an up and a down into everything. But I've never done the cabin thing. And I'd be kind of curious, anyone, is there people who have done the RVing, the cabins, the you know, the traditional hotel route? What have you done? What has your experience been? What would your preference be, again, given the opportunity? And something else that might be laying some groundwork for some good news this year. It's one of those things that takes a long time to kind of filter through, but federal like rates basically, I believe were dropped about another 1/4 point recently here. So, you know, earlier this year we saw our first rate drop in several years, and it was surprisingly, it was a 1/2 point, not a 1/4 point. Now it's gone another 1/4 point down. It is loosely projected that we may see some additional rate drops through this coming, well, the current year. Again, I'm recording this before technically January actually happens, but at a reduced rate and probably at reduced percentage cuts. So the last couple times the feds have met together, they've dropped at least a 1/4 point per meeting, if not more. It's loosely thought that they may drop a 1/4 point at most every other meeting. And again, this is not to say like these aren't the interest rates that directly affect RV stuff. It's one of those things where it all kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, trickles down. But it is a situation where they are kind of loosening the reins on things and letting some horses run a little harder, which eventually could potentially translate into some relief on RV interest rates. So fingers crossed there, that continues to pan out. Quick little notes here in a manufacturing news segment. Remember we talked about Alliance and how they've grown and they've demonstrated that people are their greatest resource. Well, they have literally put their money where their people are. They've announced essentially an employee appreciation program that is retroing back to their 2019 start date. Because if you think about it, you know, when they were a brand new manufacturer, they were, who knows if they were going to do anything. And some people took some major risks with their careers jumping on board. Because the thing with the RV industry, what you don't realize maybe unless you actually see where this stuff is done, it's the smallest big industry you're ever going to find. So like if you have a job where you're a production manager or something like that, and you give that up to go to a new company and they fold, you may not have another job in the RV industry waiting for you. Like there's just not a lot of slots beyond the labor force, essentially. Well, Alliance has announced this program, or basically they're awarding staff members with $5,000 bonuses if they've been there every 5, 10, 15, 25 years, etc. Again, retro back to their 2019 start date. And I've never heard of a manufacturer doing something like that. Maybe they have. I've never heard about it, but I think that is just an extremely cool policy. And when you look back at those stats and you see that Alliance is one of the only groups in a struggling market that is continuing to succeed, there we go, significantly. I don't think these factors are unrelated. I think that they've found some good people, that they've coached up some good people and tried to foster things. They've acknowledged they're not perfect. They've set a standard for having really good customer service in an industry that is not generally known for something like that. Unfortunately, you know, just being real about it. I just massive kudos to them for that. Over to Grand Design, they've recently announced how they're going to continue expanding their motorized series with the I believe it's called Lineage F series, which will be effectively a Super C. Now, at the time this is releasing, I can't show you anything on this. I've seen it. I've got it on camera. You'll get to see it soon, but I can't show it yet. It will make its debut effectively at the Tampa Super Show. I'm sure that I'll have my own footage out around or near that time. So if you're kind of curious as to what's going on there, hey, I got a chance to get my hands on something. Also, I noticed a thing where, so Jayco for years, like they've had green initiatives where they've tried to find ways to recycle water and eliminate waste and etc. Reduce their impact and their footprints on things. They recently completed, starting back I think in 2021, their phase 1 energy conservation efforts, where there are some areas where they've reduced the amount of power usage. They have anywhere from 23 to 50% on different aspects of their campus. And they're now moving into the second phase of this, with the goal being that, yes, they're investing some money up front right now, with the goal of being able to reduce their operating costs to provide a less expensive product down the line without removing features or using substandard materials. They're trying to reduce their operating costs to give you, the same product for less money down the line as compared to the market average. I have no doubt that overall, over time, all RV pricing will probably continue to creep up, but I do think it's cool that a manufacturer realizes, 10 years down the line, that's going to continue to add up, and we have to find ways to kind of fight back against that. So that was very cool that Jayco is making that kind of effort, because, again, as far as I know, I haven't seen a lot of that from a lot of other builders. And two big tips of the metaphorical cap out there. The first is to my buddy Matt. You might have heard of this guy, Matt's RV Reviews, this whole crazy guy, Matt and Will over there. Well, they also have a really effective, really well-respected, suite at this point of RV tank treatment stuff called Liquefied. Well, they're giving away a camper. And I'm going to leave you a little link for their sweepstakes down in the video description. If you're curious to see how you could win a free camper, check that out. Check the details. I was looking through the details. I'm like, all right, so what's really the deal here? It is open to Canadians, which I thought was cool. But if you're a Canadian, you have to answer a math problem before you can get the camper if you're the winner. And apparently there's something with Canadian law and the way that lotteries work, where they can't just have an open raffle effectively like we have in America. It has to be a contest. So if you can answer 2 + 2 is 4, you're the winner. That was just hilarious. Anyway, I'd be really curious to see the origin of that. But also, another tip of the hat to Campers Inn. I feel like in the last 3 or 4 months, I've mentioned them several times on some areas where they're giving back, but they're I don't want to necessarily put someone on blast, but I'll just simply say there are those who feel FEMA kind of had dropped the ball on some hurricane relief efforts, especially around the Carolinas that got hit really hard, and Campers Inn had donated 32 RVs for the purpose of helping folks affected by that. And there's still much more help that needs done out there, but anything that is about taking care of people like that, huge respect to you folks for doing what you did over there. Tip of the cap. And that's what I got for you this month. And the freezing rain has quit, but I need to go. I'm not wearing my insulated underbritches. I need to go get my chestnuts roasting by an open fire. So, I don't know if you think I'm funny, but I crack myself up sometimes. If you appreciate what we're doing here for you, keeping you abreast and in the know best we can. If you appreciate how we continue to pursue that relentless pursuit of transparency. All right. Yeah, let's go with that. Hit that subscribe button. And if there's something here you think might be useful, share this out into your favorite social groups, and let's kind of help spread the word to make everybody aware as much as possible. So, till next time, thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully it's a little warmer out here. Take care, stay safe, have fun, and happy camping, everyone.